How can one single book, the Quran, lead to literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different interpretations? That's the big question we're diving into today. We're going to break down a really unique methodology that one student developed over 5 years, creating a personal framework to try and find some consistency in all that complexity.
So yeah, this is the central puzzle, right? You've got one book, but this vast, sprawling sea of interpretations, and a lot of them completely contradict each other. So why? How does that happen?
Well, the argument at the very heart of this whole approach is that the problem isn't the text itself, it's the tools we're using to understand it. Without a clear, consistent approach, a solid methodology, of course interpretations are going to go in a million different directions. It's about the toolkit, not the book.
So, what did he do? He decided to build his own. What we're about to walk through is that personal framework, a set of principles and tools he designed for a rational and, most importantly, consistent way to engage with the text.
Okay, so the whole thing kicks off with what he calls the universal fundamentals. And the interesting thing is, he argues these aren't just rules for understanding the Quran. He believes they're essential for analyzing any complex text out there. Let's see what they are.
So here they are, his 5 foundational rules. It all starts with making sure your methodology is external and neutral. From there, you have to turn the focus inward and acknowledge your own biases. Only then can you actually select a framework, apply it with total consistency, and, this part is key, always be open to refining your understanding.
And that first rule, man, it is the bedrock of this entire system. You cannot use the text to prove your method for reading the text. That's just a big logical loop. The tools you use to analyze something have to come from outside of it. It's as simple as that.
So, once you have your external tools picked out, the next critical step is to look inward. You absolutely have to acknowledge your own personal lens.
And the point here is really simple, but it's also incredibly profound. True neutrality is pretty much impossible unless you first understand your own biases. You have to identify your default assumptions. Otherwise, you're not really discovering meaning in the text. You're just confirming what you already believe.
And here are just a few of the specific biases he warns us to look out for. You know, things like trying to make the text fit a narrative you're already familiar with from another tradition, or getting lost down a rabbit hole searching for hidden numerical codes. These are super common traps where our internal biases can just completely distort our interpretation, and we might not even realize it's happening.
And he applies this rule to himself, which is what makes it so powerful. He's very open about his own approach, saying, look, for him, it's almost entirely a logical exercise, not an emotional one. This isn't him making a judgment, it's just an honest acknowledgement of his personal lens.
He does the exact same thing with his cultural background. He knows he can't just erase his upbringing, so the only honest thing to do is to put it on the table and acknowledge its potential influence. It's really all about intellectual honesty.
Okay, so once you've got the universal rules down and you've acknowledged your personal lens, what does the day-to-day application actually look like? This is what he calls his current toolkit.
His core process looks deceptively simple, but it is incredibly rigorous. First, you form a hypothesis about what something means. Then, and this is the really hard part, you have to test that hypothesis against the entire text. If you find even a single contradiction, your hypothesis is invalid. It's broken, and you have to go back to the drawing board and start all over again.
Now, this is a key piece of his linguistic toolkit. He makes this really important distinction between mafhum and mana. Think of mafhum as the stable root concept of a word, like the core idea of a tree. Mana, on the other hand, is the specific meaning in its context. Are we talking about an oak tree, a family tree, or a decision tree? Recognizing this difference is crucial because it stops you from applying one rigid definition to a word everywhere it appears.
So, all of this leads him to a conclusion that he himself admits is a bitter pill to swallow for a lot of people, especially those who rely on translations. He argues that a perfect, 100% accurate translation is impossible. And why is that? Because any translation is, by its very nature, an interpretation. It's filtered through one person's biases, their understanding, their moment in time. It can be an incredibly helpful guide for sure, but it can never truly be the original text.
So where does all of this actually lead? Well, it's not to a single final answer. Instead, it leads to this idea that understanding itself is a journey, an ongoing process.
And it's so important to understand that he doesn't present this methodology as some fixed, unchangeable dogma. In fact, he specifically calls it his version 1.0, fully expecting that it's going to grow, change, and be refined as his own knowledge deepens. It's a living tool, not a stone tablet.
This leads to a really optimistic conclusion. The text itself is fixed, but our tools for understanding it, our collective human knowledge, are constantly improving. His belief is that this allows each new generation to potentially see more in the text, to understand it more deeply than the one before.
And that leaves us with a final, powerful question to chew on. If understanding is this ever-evolving journey, always building on the knowledge of those who came before us, what on earth will future generations see? What new layers of meaning will they uncover with tools and perspectives that we can't even imagine today?